Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good day, hello. I'm not sure when you're listening to this, but you are listening to the Portsmouth Proud podcast. I'm your host, Alexia Washington, the Public Information Officer for P-Town's finest, the Portsmouth, Virginia Police Department. We serve a community that's not too far from the ocean, not too far from the bay, right on the river, and we're producing this podcast for you, for the people of Portsmouth, so that you know what the vision is from the PPD for the city as it pertains to law enforcement, as well as the plan and how you can play a part in it. This is episode 5 of the Portsmouth Proud podcast, so you want to be a detective. We have two wonderful guests with us. We have Detective Gino Jackson as well as Detective Michael Siniscalchi. And I wanted to say welcome, gentlemen.
Hello. Welcome. Good morning.
Thanks for being here. So before we dive into the topic about becoming a detective or your stories of your detective stories, let's get some background information. Where are each of you from?
I am actually from this area. I'm from Chesapeake, Virginia. Went to Western Branch High School, and I've pretty much been here for my entire life, this area.
Okay, so Detective Jackson is a Hampton Roads native. What about you? I'm Detective Siniscalchi.
I am from Hollywood, Florida, which is, if nobody's familiar where it's at, it is just south of Fort Lauderdale. It's located in Broward County.
Cool. So you're from Florida. Detective Jackson is from Virginia. Detective Siniscalchi, how long have you been a police officer?
June 27th this month will be 19 years with the Portsmouth Police Department, 21 years total.
Okay. And what about you, Detective Jackson?
March 7th of 2011, so I've been here for just over 13 years.
Cool. So what inspired, both of you, go with Detective Jackson first, what inspired you to become a police officer?
It's always been something that I've been interested in. I never ever thought that I'd be able to do it. Just knowing me when I was younger, I never really told my family that I wanted to do it until I actually went and applied to go and do it, and I knew that I was in the process and I was pretty far along, and it just amazed them when I told them, yeah, I got hired.
Okay. So, but what was it about, you wanted to do it and you hadn't told anybody, but what was it about police officers, or what was the police officer that influenced you to I think I can do this?
I think being younger and just watching police officers, and I've had some experiences with police officers that were good. Like we had a Portsmouth police officer, Officer Willie Mills, used to be my dare officer at Alliance Christian, and he was a good friend of my grandfather's. And I've always grown up, like I said, I'm from Chesapeake, but I've always been in the city of Portsmouth. So I've had some experiences with Portsmouth police officers, and just watching them and other officers and seeing what they do and what I thought they did. And I just think it was a noble profession. It's something I just wanted to be a part of.
Okay, that's awesome. Okay, so you have some Portsmouth ties with or the Portsmouth Police Department ties. That's cool. What about you, sir?
Oh, mine's not a story with most people. First off, I did not want to become a police officer. Okay. I had no interest in becoming a police officer. I joined the U.S. Navy. Did a lot of great things in the Navy. There was some more. I wish I did more when I was in. But overall, I look back on it when I was in, I enjoyed it. And I did not plan on becoming a police officer. I kind of fell into it by accident.
How did you fall into being a police officer?
Well, okay, so I got out of the Navy in 2001. I was separating out, and anybody who's military, you have your EAOS that'll come up. It's called the end of obligated service, and you go on if you have leave on the books, you can take leave, and they call it terminal leave, so you're using all your leave at the end. I was on terminal leave when 9/11 occurred. I actually was driving through Ohio, through Pennsylvania. I had to go through D.C. during 9/11 that day. I'll never forget it. And I was in the process of working with American Airlines, trying to get in with American Airlines. I was going to go into aviation mechanics, and I was going to go to school. And basically, when 9/11 happened, there was so much uncertainty. Airlines completely shifted focus. Everything went haywire. So I fell into police work by accident because what happened was I was trying to get back into either the Navy or I'm going to try to pursue the aviation side of this and mechanics and get into it. And when I was doing my resume, I applied for the Department of Defense, and there was a lady at HR, and she was the one that suggested law enforcement. And she looked at my background, she looked at me, and she said, wouldn't you be interested? And I remember telling her this exact words. You think I want to put my life on the line for $28,000 a year?
Okay.
So there was no way I was going to do this. She ends up actually gets with me later and says, look, and convinces me to put in a resume. And so I do a resume. Next thing you know, I'm being hired, and I was working under the GS series. If anybody works in federal government work, they'll know what GS series is. Right. So I was under GS series. I went and worked for the Department of Defense. They have a law enforcement academy. It's a watered down version of law enforcement. It really is a base police. It is watered down because there's not as much crime. But it still has that structure, and it's a good way to get your foot in the door to learn. So I went in there, got hired, worked at Little Creek for a while. And then next thing you know, I started realizing I kind of like this, and I want to pursue this further. And I had some family that were police officers at the time, way back before, and I was around a lot of police officers for a little bit in Florida. And then next thing you know, a Portsmouth officer convinced me to apply for Portsmouth. I applied to Portsmouth, and along with some other departments, and Portsmouth picked me up the fastest. And next thing you know, I'm hired. 2005 I started with the intention that I was not going to give Portsmouth more than 3 years, because at the time they were under, you had some different situations going on with departments, and I was planning on going to another department.
Okay.
And that obviously did not happen.
Okay.
And I stayed. And I stayed because of the people I worked with, and you were allowed to pursue police work and understand it, and they encourage you to do that. So
that's kind of what MPO Hoyas was saying last week of Portsmouth and the training and the ability to have collateral duties and to learn the different areas of policing. It's really helpful for a career in law enforcement if you're interested in a career in law enforcement. So you fell into law enforcement or into policing. You've been here 19 years at the Portsmouth Police Department. So with both of you, what took you from, okay, I want to be a police officer to I want to be a detective?
Well, it's funny. That's actually a funny story how that happened. I think I'd been on for about 6 years at the time. I'd done 3 years on nights. I did 3 years on days. There was an opportunity that came up where I got into the school resource program. I always, once I got here and got working and saw how different things were, the school resource unit where the officers worked in the schools at the time, that always seemed to interest me. I had an opportunity to do that, so that was how I got out of uniform patrol. Not that I wanted to just get out, that's what I wanted to do.
Right. And
I did that for about 2.5 years. Very, very, very rewarding. I worked at Churchland High School. I worked at IC Norcom High School. I had a ball. That was probably my favorite assignment, just because of the pride that people have there at Norcom. My family, all my family went to IC Norcom. A lot of Norcom ties there. My granddad was a teacher at IC Norcom. But I spent time in the school resource program, and there was an opportunity that came up when they were creating a property crimes unit that was separate from the detective bureau. It was at the time they had created this unit in the special operations division. So that opportunity became available. I applied, I interviewed. and I was one of 6 people selected for that. That is how I became a detective. That was in 2019. And since then, I've been in robbery, and I was pretty much asked in the end of 2021 to join the homicide unit. And that is one of the highest honors of my life.
Okay.
Like, that is something I never thought that I would be able to do something like this. And at that age, the age that I am, and the amount of years I've been on, in a lot of places it's kind of unheard of, because they generally want people to be a little older, be a little bit more seasoned. But in this department and this city, you get so much experience. And if you show that you want to learn and you want to go out here and investigate and you put together good cases, those opportunities are easier for you to get. And that's kind of how I fell into being a detective. Never thought I would be. I've completely thought when I started back in 2011, I'd be completely happy with, riding a beat for 20 years. Not that there's anything wrong with that at all. It's just I did not think that I would ever be an investigator.
For me, it was to know me, and Detective Jackson knows, he's worked with me for a very long time now, and I probably didn't know I wanted to be a detective till later. It was through in my career. I was constantly putting myself in positions to do more than what my position, the current assignment I had. So I started doing investigations basically probably, I would say, about a year after I was released from field training. I started doing it in patrol regularly because at the time you could do that. There was the opportunity. And then as I moved into, right after patrol, I left and went to community policing. And then I started doing stuff there. And for me, what it kind of inspired, I guess, the way, for me, it was always just, I saw people that did investigations, and I wanted to kind of do that work that they were doing, other detectives were doing. And I wanted to do great work at that. So for me, there was, the inspiration, I guess I would say, yeah, it was just seeing other detectives on the department. I wanted to do that work eventually. I didn't know I wanted to do it till a little bit later, but I just wanted to do that work.
I always thought it was kind of cool. Like, I see them come out to the calls and stuff when I was young and fresh on the department, and I always just thought, I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, I want to do that. I never, like I said, never thought I would.
So what skills or traits do you believe are essential for someone considering a career as a detective?
You have to be inquisitive. You should be someone that is good with speaking and talking to people, and communication. Communication is key. You have to be able to capture someone's attention to be able to get them to want to talk to you, because that's our job, is to talk to people. Nothing's more frustrating than when you go to a crime scene, and Mike and I both have had it. We've been together and this has happened. I know multiple officers or detectives that have dealt this. You go to a scene and you go up to talk to somebody, and you go because you know they were an eyewitness, and you go to ask them questions, and they look at you and say, I'm not talking to you. You do your job. You go out and do your job. You figure it out. Well, you see, my job is to talk to you, and we find facts. That's what we do. If you're there, you help us find those facts. So those are some of the things. Like I said, communication. You have to be inquisitive. You have to have the drive. You have to have the drive to want to figure something out. You can't just give up and say, well, that's I'm never going to figure that out. If you go into it with that mindset, then you won't figure it out. Like, stuff isn't going to just fall out the sky. You got to want to get up and go get it.
Well, I'm going to piggyback off of the communicator. What communication, and he's talking about, and this will probably, I'll answer a question later, but this is, you need to have, there is as a police officer, and anybody that joins and becomes a police officer, you need to find your strengths and your weaknesses.
Okay.
We always tend to say, work on your weaknesses. Yes, we got to work on them, but don't forget to work on your strengths.
Okay.
My strength was that I was very, very good at communication, and I'm very good at getting people to talk, and I'm very good at the persuasion. I learned this over the years, and that's a skill that you have to develop. You can develop it, but you got to have some sort of a foundation of it a little bit. And you cannot be in this line of work if you have any fear of talking to individuals from every single type of background to age difference. You have to be able to talk to them. So that's one of the skills at piggyback. You have to be a good communicator. The other one of the skills that's very important is you need to be someone that can articulate what you found, what were your findings, and you got to be decent. I'm going to say decent. Maybe the word proficient at writing.
Okay.
And I can't say that if you aspire to be a detective, if you see that there's a weakness in your writing skills, well, it's time to perfect that. Be better. Get better.
When you say that with writing, because me not being a police officer, of course not being a detective, but not even being a police officer, what kind of writing is necessary? Are you, is it just writing out a list of the facts or details? Are you creating a narrative, or what kind of writing are you talking about?
Well, it's going to be more of a narrative, and your writing is going to also, it can affect the investigation and who's looking at it from remember, you're writing this to someone who was never there. They were not there. They obviously didn't get woken up in the middle of the night. They are going to find out all these facts sometimes months, sometimes years later. And it's a person who has no involvement at all other than they are here to evaluate the case, and they have to make a decision on whether or not is this a case that involves charging people involved or not. And when you're writing, it's important. And maybe one day we'll do a follow-up. I'll do one with you, and I kind of give you a better understanding of the writing. But you're writing, and I've told him this. We literally just discussed this yesterday.
Yep.
So your writing has to be, you got to be able to do some decent grammar. You got to be able to do, and I would say 12th grade, and that's why the problem is nobody knows what that is. Okay. So, and this is across the board, I think. And
nobody knows what is.
Well, that level of writing. Okay. They don't know what that, because it's changed so much in the educational standards. So many people, you don't know. And, that's going to be a skill that you have to work on. If you don't know how to do it, then you got to work on it.
Okay.
And you got to pursue it.
Well, I like where you're going because, it's easy to talk about, I shouldn't say easy, but we have an idea when someone says a good communicator. I think most of us think about speaking, being able to speak to people or being able to give like a formal presentation or something like that. I don't think that we all think about how important it is to be able to write what you're trying to convey a message through the written word is a little bit more complicated, and there are different standards within grammar, so I think that is important. And now it kind of gives me more of an idea when I was talking with again our guest last week when she was talking about the testing of why you all why there's writing on the test, not just like reading comprehension, but why there's a writing portion.
Right.
I mean, the thing is that you look at it, it's like a word, just a word in a sentence can change the complete meaning of something.
Right, and that's the other, so there's, there's another skill that I'm big on that you have to have, and if you're going to be at the bare minimum, I kind of divide. So you know me and get to know my background. I'm a person that's very competitive. I did play sports growing up, organized sports. If you would ask me, I think you will, maybe down the line, I'll answer that question about who inspired you or something. I will tell you, there's two levels I always say. Good and great.
Okay.
If you want to be good, you need to accomplish some of these skills. You got to be a good communicator. You got to be good at the writing. You got to be able to write and articulate it. And you got to be really good at time management.
Okay.
And you have to be someone that needs little supervision. Not no supervision, little supervision.
Okay.
If you are not that person that can have little supervision, if you don't fit that criteria, you're going to have a hard time if you even go into the world of investigating, because your supervisor has a lot to deal with.
Yes.
Right.
So they should not have to take that time to have to supervise you directly.
Right.
So, and again, that comes from my background. So my background here, and it really, what led me to the whole thing was I was a police officer. I came out of patrol and went to community policing. Okay. So community policing taught you how to supervise yourself. And I also learned how to be an investigator through there, because I would take on cases in my neighborhood, my assigned areas. I took on so many cases, like I investigated everything with the exception of sex crime and homicides. I was assigned an area. I took on street robberies. I took those cases. The investigation bureau loved it.
Yeah.
Because you were getting involved. So I was learning, and I was learning from others how to work these cases. So.
And it's funny that Mike just said that, because when I was a school resource officer, that was at a time where that fell under community policing. And in the school, you are the investigator for the majority of what happens in that school. You get to know the kids, you get to know the staff, you get to know school board members, you get to know parents. You're really, really an active part of the community. And because the school is the community, you're in the community every single day. And one thing I think a lot of folks don't realize, everything that happens out here on these streets happens within the schools. People don't like to hear that, but it does. I've investigated everything from a larceny all the way up to sexual assault in a school. Like I did get a lot of experience investigating while in the schools and in community policing, just as Mike said. I mean, that's kind of another thing that kind of made me want to do more, and learn more about really diving into these cases. Because sometimes if it was something that required more follow-up, something where I couldn't, I didn't have the resources within the schools to be able to do it, it would involve the detective bureau, and I'd have detectives come up to the school all the time, and they might need to speak with a student or a teacher about something, or I might have to pass the investigation that I'd been working on to them. And I said, you know what, I want to take this one all the way home. I want to run it in for the touchdown, and that's another reason why I wanted to become a detective, an investigator.
Well, I think this is a good place for us to take our first community break, and when we return, we'll be talking more with the detective Siniscalchi as well as Detective Jackson, and we'll talk a little bit more about what does a typical day look like for a detective.
Are you considering a career in law enforcement? Sign on today as a Portsmouth police officer and receive up to $1,500 if you're already Virginia certified. We offer a $1,000 allowance for a bachelor's degree and a $500 allowance for an associate's degree on top of your base pay. Officers can also earn additional income on time spent in court and at community events. Visit our website at portsmouthpd.us for more information on how to apply.
National Night Out will be here before you know it, so mark your calendars for Tuesday, August 6th, and join us at Festival Park for the ultimate community gathering. That's August 6th from 3 to 8 p.m. at Festival Park. See you at National Night Out. So we're back from our break, and we're here with Detective Siniscalchi as well as Detective Jackson. And we were talking about what brought them to the work of being a detective. And now we're just going to talk about, like, what does a typical day for a detective look like?
We always joke around because it's like whenever you come into work, it's generally whatever plans you had for that day, it's not going to go that way. Straight up, but if you want to say a typical day, you could say that being a detective involves generally court in the mornings, lots of meetings with either attorneys, either your supervisors, other detectives. Sometimes we have, meetings with other jurisdictions, like investigators from other jurisdictions, federal agencies. That does happen quite a bit. A lot of paperwork.
How do you manage that?
The polished version, or do you want the real version?
We want the real version.
The real
We
version.
want the real version. That kids can hear.
To piggyback what he said is a typical day, I will say this to describe it, and this is law enforcement in general. You will, if you experience and people want to join law enforcement, you go from 0 to 80 in 2 seconds. That's your day.
Okay.
It could be 0, 5, 10, but you're going to 80 in 2 seconds. It changes so rapidly. So, and caseload and managing, you do what you do the best you can. What people don't see from us and the citizens, I understand this, and Detective Jackson, I'm sure does. He does, and I can speak for other detectives. I'm sure they do too. Citizens will. You got to be realistic and say, the citizen is upset. You have dealt with them in crisis mode, and you're investigating a case, especially ours, you've been entrusted to investigate their loved one's death. And the best you can do, what I've learned, is be honest with them and let them know realistically what occurs with how the cases are investigated and what can happen. The caseload is very high.
And that's partly because we're short-staffed.
Yeah. The national, what people don't understand is that the manpower has shrunk so much. Everybody's dealing with this, not just Portsmouth. Every single department is dealing with manpower. I mean, we can go back, yes, it may have started in 2016. I would say 2019, 2020, 2021 was probably the biggest short, if we do the years and look at, I think Virginia lost 3,000 police officers at one time, the state, if you calculate the whole state. So manpower is the issue. A lot of the stuff that we would like to see, I'm realistic, I understand that. You can't fix it until you have more detectives, because you got to have more officers. Number one priority is calls for service. The next priority, I believe, is the investigations of at least violent crime.
Okay. Yeah.
And then move on to quality of life investigations. Like I said, our caseload's high. It is, and we do the best we can. And unfortunately, we basically prioritize in what is the one that's the hottest and the freshest lead. That lead's going to disappear.
How do you manage that? I mean,
it's very hard. It's like a dance. You, like he said, you have to balance going back and forth between different cases. Whatever you have the best leads on, and a lot of times it's whatever the newest case. The first 48 thing, yeah, that's true. The first 48, you might have another homicide within that first 48 hours of you investigating another homicide. We've had 2 homicides in the same night.
Thing with the caseload, like you're saying, how do you manage? You got to pursue it, and if you're asking the stress, like that internal, okay, well, here's the real version. We're human.
Right.
So everyone listening to this, how would you act when you're frustrated? And you're frustrated at your employment, or trust me, we take it out on each other. We've done it numerous times, and you're next thing you know, you're yelling, and you're in the car by yourself. You're frustrated. Your own families probably feel it too. My family knows. We get that way because we care.
Right.
I do. I can speak for myself, and I know Detective Jackson. I can tell you, again, I told you I'm very competitive. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be just proficient. I wanted to be great. And when you're competitive and you do this, you want to win. Mm-hmm. And to me, a win is that we investigate that case fully.
Right. And that's the other thing. All investigations don't lead to an arrest. The misconception is that our job is to lock people up. No, it's actually not. We are fact finders. We are there to investigate. No matter where that investigation leads us, we take the facts of that case, we build it, we put it together, we put it in a nice little package, and then sometimes it gets passed on to the Commonwealth Attorney's Office and it's prosecuted. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes you find out that certain things happened, and unfortunately sometimes people do contribute to their death from times, and that is the hardest thing to tell a family member, that based upon the facts of the case, we can't bring a prosecution against someone because something happened, or your loved one may or may not have done something that led to them being killed. It does happen, and that's rough. And sometimes when you follow the facts of the case, it will lead you in a direction where you find out, maybe there were some other things that were going on there that led to this happening, and unfortunately, we can't charge this person. Or the worst feeling is when you find out who did something. You can know all day, but if you don't have a cooperating witness, or you're just missing a piece that's going to hold you back, people want to know why these cases don't get prosecuted a lot of times. We solve them. Oh, we'll solve them. But if you've got someone who has direct knowledge about something that happened and they just don't want to come forward and say, do the right thing and say, I'm going to go and I'm going to just say what I know about this. I really, a lot of times these are friends. Sometimes it's family members.
Yep.
How can you say you love somebody? How can you say that you cared about somebody, but you know information that could identify their killer, but it's not even always because you're scared. I do get that. That is one of the things that happens where people are afraid of retaliation. That's actually that doesn't happen as often as people think. It's more they don't want to be labeled a snitch. They don't think it's their business to tell on somebody else. Well, I mean, if you cared about this person that you're crying about, or that you're, posting about every day on social media, making it look good for everybody else, then why don't you do the right thing and help us get the answers for that person's death?
So one of my questions was like how important community relationships or public cooperation is to your work, but just from you all talking right now, it's essential, because like you said,
it is essential.
Not cooperating, or the community isn't cooperating, individuals within the community aren't cooperating, then you're not going to be able to get the information as you're a fact finder to be able to send it off to who is going to prosecute them.
Right.
We're not prosecuting, we're just
we find the facts and we pass the case along, and even when we pass the case along, I just had this conversation today. Once you solve a case, and a solve would be you found out what happened, and in the cases where you're able to prosecute or have it prosecuted or charge someone, there's still a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
You can't just and
it doesn't end with an arrest.
Right.
I can't tell you. I've got families now. The arrest. That's just the beginning.
Yeah.
Where there's more.
Okay, so go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, there's more, and then and this piggybacks back to what we do as homicide. And I want hopefully the citizens understand this, and I tell families of mine understand this because I clearly tell them this when I became a homicide detective. My job is, I am here to get you answers. Now, I don't know where they're going to go, which direction. Sometimes they lead to where charges are applied to this, and sometimes they don't. And that's the way any investigator should always investigate their cases. That keeps them objective, and it keeps them an open mind.
Can you give us like a brief overview? I know you can go through every detail, but like, what does an investigation look like from start to finish? Like, I know for me, working here, I'm sometimes confused on, is this uniformed patrol or has this been handed off to an investigator or a detective?
Mm-hmm.
So like, where is that line? Because you were talking about earlier, you might have done a little bit of investigating with your previous role. So where's the line?
So that's the funny thing about Portsmouth, and that's one of the reasons I love Portsmouth. We have experience that some other departments might not get. As Detective Siniscalchi said earlier, he investigated in community policing everything all the way up to what other than sexual assault and homicides.
I didn't do any sex crimes or homicides. But if it was a robbery that happened in my neighborhood, I worked it. If I could work it, I will work it. I will talk to my sergeant. I'll call the investigator. Hey, can I get this signed to me? I'm going to take it. Drug cases. That's how I got into narcotics. I was narcotics, too, prior to homicide. So it's... What he's going to piggyback is the experience that you get to do this. You go to other departments, you're going to hand off, you have a situation, they're going to a detective.
There's some places, and it's not a bad thing. It's actually great because they have the resources and the manpower and the people to do certain things, but it's like, you could have some place where, okay, I pulled somebody over, they've got drugs on them. Hey, narcotics detective, come over here, I need you to handle this. Or, hey, it's a DUI. Oh, yeah, we've got a team for that. They can do that. That's great. And sometimes I wish we did have that. But at the same time, we get all that experience. Working in uniform, like, you get that base. Here's something that people don't understand a lot of times. I talk to a lot of people, and they're like, I want to be a detective. I want to be a detective. Okay, so let me explain to you how you become a detective. You have to be a police officer first. You have to know... You have to have those basics, because at the end of the day, people forget this. They ask me all the time. They're like, "Well, no, you're not a cop. You're a detective. You're not a police officer. You're a detective." We are all, from the group that just graduated yesterday, all the way up to Chief Jenkins. We are all police officers.
Right.
The detectives are police officers. We just have a different job.
Right.
My job is not to go out and pull people over every day. My job is not to go and answer calls for service, though I can. We are fully... You have to be a police officer before you're a detective.
Right.
Now, if you want to be an investigator, like a private investigator or something like that, that's completely different. You can go that avenue, but if you want to work for a police department, you're not going to get hired off the street and be like, you're a detective. That doesn't work that way.
I know we talked earlier about like the skills that you need or that you think that's important for your work.
Mm-hmm.
But what is some other like advice for a person who is interested in a career as a detective or would like to get there? They're a police officer, they understand that, but now they would like to be a detective. What should they do?
Do follow up on your cases that you do have.
Okay.
So if you're, no matter what it is, treat every case, like it's the case of the century.
I'll piggyback that. Let me tell you, and this is where, and we were kind of going down that line. If you want to be a detective, and I've told this to my recruits, I was a field training officer too, so I have that background, and I trained a lot, and I taught at the academy, and I can tell you, one of the things I tell them, if you want to be a good investigator, you want to get there, Start off when you're in patrol. Start off with the easiest, or at least the one that has a potential lead. When you go to those hit and run cases, you're usually getting a tag, vehicle tag. If you can do it within your time frame and your responsibility in patrol, start investigating those. Just do a hit and run investigation. That's how I started. I would take the hit and runs that I go to, and I'd investigate them. One, you're going to help out the traffic unit. Two, you're going to increase your knowledge.
Yep.
On how to investigate a case, and then you move on from there. You can move on to some assault. I was literally less than 1 year cut loose, and I did an investigation, and I got a conviction for robbery of an Eckerd.
That's how long ago
That's how
was.
long I've been here. We had an Eckerd in the city of Portsmouth that was located at 3115 High Street. I worked it. Guy went in there. He robbed the store.
I had a robbery
took
there,
cigarettes.
When I was in robbery, I had a robbery there. But go ahead.
Yeah, it was an Eckerd. But I think it was at Rite Aid when you were in robbery. That was.
Oh
Rite
yeah,
Aid.
no,
the
you're right.
Rite Aid was over there.
Yep.
But it was an Eckerd, and I'll never forget it. And I learned how to work that case, and understand that, right? So you want to be a detective, you need to start off and start doing that work. Now, the other thing that's essential, and this is something I hope that the officers understand this, and I'm very big on this, you need to understand also law.
Yes.
You need to have, if you're going to ever, you need to understand that what we are as police officers and law enforcement in this country is we are the one side that does enforcement of law practically.
Okay, yes.
Where a lawyer interprets, argues, and presents. So we're out there in real time.
Yep.
So you need to understand the law.
And how to apply it.
And apply that. So it's, one of the things, I remember I used to teach courtroom testimony. And one of the things they'd ask, like, how did you get there? Like, how did you know to do this during testimony and how to understand how to testify? Well, one, again, you control your destiny and you control your training. Me, and there are others that have done this like me, we would sit in courtrooms and just watch testimony. And I'd learn. And I'd learn from the attorneys. And I had very good attorneys that worked for this city that I got to learn from. So you just got to go and you got to kind of go out there and learn it. And that's how you'll become a good detective. That's how you can get there. But you got to build those skills up and take advantage of what you do have. If you're in patrol, start off with something small and start working yourself up. And one thing we do have is the patrol detective position.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a great.
That is helping.
I think that's great. You mentioned this, and this is something that don't be afraid to come to us in the Bureau and talk to us.
If anyone ever has a question, the best way to learn it is just ask one of us. And we will tell you, like, if it's a good time, it might not be in the moment, but if you ever have a question about something or how did you find this out, come ask us. We'll tell you.
So education-wise, there's a mix of informal and formal ways, and I'm sure that there's like training.
There's training. I forgot. So there's internal trainings that happen. And you can take interview and interrogation courses. You can take, you can take identifying deceptive behaviors courses. There's basic investigations courses. There's all sorts of things that you can do to enhance your professional development to get you to become a detective. I would suggest those are some very good starters. And then when you become a detective, there's also advanced courses or trainings that you can take depending on what it is that you do in the Investigations Bureau.
is a good time to have another break, another community break. And when we return with Detective Jackson and Detective Siniscalchi, we're going to talk about, is there any technology that they use on their cases?
Ooh.
And then we'll have some final words.
Are you considering a career in law enforcement? Sign on today as a Portsmouth police officer and receive up to $1,500 if you're already Virginia certified. We offer a $1,000 allowance for a bachelor's degree and a $500 allowance for an associate's degree on top of your base pay. Officers can also earn additional income on time spent in court and at community events. Visit our website at portsmouthpd.us for more information on how to apply.
National Night Out will be here before you know it, so mark your calendars for Tuesday, August 6th, and join us at Festival Park for the ultimate community gathering. That's August 6th from 3 to 8 p.m. at Festival Park. See you at National Night Out.
So we are back with Detective Siniscalchi and Detective Jackson. And so we're going to talk about a little bit, just briefly, we're going to talk about technology with detective work. So is there technology, I know that they have drones out on the scenes, but is there any technology that you all use, or what do you use?
I don't know.
I don't know if I want to answer that.
Yeah, no.
Because there's so much. Well,
we can answer some. Yeah, because it's amazing because the fact I was just thinking about this. I didn't know you'd ask this question, but I don't know how they solved homicides back in the 60s and before that, and even sometimes we joke about it, but we are very fortunate because the time that we're around, we've been here, both of us have been here for the evolution of policing in technology. For example, both of us, we're a dying breed, I'd say. We both were police officers before body cameras. And for us to be able to go back and see what that officer saw, or actually you can't see everything that officer saw, I want to make sure I correct that, but to have an idea of what that officer saw when they first got there on scene, or what certain people said, or what was done, or how a particular thing was laid before it got disturbed, that's so helpful. Cell phones. Huge. That's something that's great. Every officer in our department is issued a city cell phone, which is great. That wasn't even a thing when I first got here. That was more people in specialized units.
Video. I mean, there's more. I was just telling that to my wife the other day. Yeah. I mean, you commit a crime today. I really told her, I said, I don't know what it's going to be 20 years from now, but if you're committing crimes, the odds are now you're running across it. You are on video doing that crime somewhere at some point. Video is expounded so much now that the average person, resident, can have their own video system on their home.
Easily.
That was unheard of.
That's true.
15 years ago. That was unheard of. You didn't have that. Where now I go and I drive down a block. How many people have cameras? And so now that's the technology that you're seeing that's still there that you have. But as an investigator, be careful depending on that.
Yeah, it doesn't show
because we tend to do that. And I'll tell you, I learned this a long time ago. You're going to solve a case majority of the time. You're going to solve it the old-fashioned way. Yeah, getting out of that car, and you are going to have to talk to as many people as you can. That's what I try to do. And I told you I'm very competitive. I would like to solve every single homicide that I have assigned to me right now. Every single one, I want to do it. And I know the only way to do that is I got to keep talking more people, because eventually, every time you have that conversation with somebody, the fishing analogy. Yeah, I'm now throwing my lure. Here it goes. I'm going to throw that lure out to the water.
You taught me that.
And I taught him that. I said, volume. The more you do, there's a good chance
You're going to catch
you're
a
going to run
fish
in.
eventually.
You're going to run into that person.
Yeah.
There's going to be that one that's going to have the information that you need, that may have been there, and that's going to break that case wide open. And the next thing you know, you're now on this hunt. Because when it starts on some of these cases, that's the other thing. I come in today and have no idea that one of my cases is about to break wide open. And I get on, I'm on it. Let's go. We're running.
That's the drive.
And that's that drive. You got to stay on it. But, and that's the hardest part for the families, I think, because they got to go through an emotional roller coaster, and I understand that. I try to tell them, be prepared. This I can't say this will happen in a couple of weeks. I can't say it'll happen in months. It could be years. What I can say is just be prepared. This is an emotional up and down roller coaster, and we do feel for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Other technologies that we have available, everyone, including us, all of us, everyone's walking around with a GPS. Just consider that. You're on camera and you're walking around with a GPS on you every day. Just that. There's other technologies. I won't go into specifics, but it's public knowledge. There's license plate reader technology. We've gotten access to a system called Flock, and there's
that's changed the game.
Fusus, which ties businesses and local residences and anyone who'd like to feed into this system, all the city cameras, all the traffic cameras. It puts them all in one place where it makes it easier for us to be able to access for investigative purposes. We use Raven, which is a part of Flock for gunshot detection. There have been so many cases where we have gotten an alert for gunshots detected, and it's in a specific area, and within seconds to minutes we get the call that there's been a gunshot wound or there's been some type of shooting somewhere, and we've got officers that will go out there when they get these alerts, because they come straight to our cell phones or our emails or however we have it set up. They go to that area and they start looking before the call even comes out. Same thing with Flock. You've got a stolen vehicle, or you've got a vehicle that was used in a very serious crime. When we get those alerts, you have officers that are available. They will flood that area and they will go looking. Those technologies really help.
It's a mixture. It's the stuff that is like specific to law enforcement, like the Flock, and then Raven, hearing the gunshots, and then it's your own technology that you're carrying on you, your phone and your Ring camera on the front of your house, or the cameras that are inside the grocery store.
Right.
So where do you see, how do you see the role of the detective or the work of a detective evolving?
More responsibility.
Yeah.
There's more of a workload for the investigator, and I think with technology that's going to happen more, because the technology is the assisting, so it's assisting them a little bit more. Do I think that it's going to get better? Yeah, I'm optimistic on it. I think it's going to get them. It's going to be the investigator 25 years from now. That's what I'm interested in seeing. 20 to 25 years. I'm really curious.
I want to see what they have.
What they have, what they're going to have at their disposal, and it's going to be hard. Like a homicide. I hope that the homicide clearance rate goes into the 90s for the country, because right now we're sitting at about 60. The country is at 60%, 50, somewhere in there. People also forget this, and citizens, I want you to remember this. Majority of your law enforcement agencies in the country are agencies about the size of, I would say, the equivalents to probably Smithfield PD. That we are not the average.
We're about a medium-sized department.
We are considered in the medium-sized department. We are not the average police department. So the average is Smithfield. That's majority of the United States. A lot of people don't know that. Yeah. And I didn't learn that until I was in more and more. And that's why it's so important with Portsmouth.
Right.
You have a unique scenario here. you have this big city experience in law enforcement. You get the volume and the amount of experience that a New York City cop or somewhere, go Richmond or something. But you also have the manpower of a smaller department, but you're above the average. So you get, and that's what helps you, I think, here. Yeah. Because you get that experience.
And once you've made a name for yourself as a police officer in this city, people do know you.
Oh, so they do.
That's the thing. And that could be good or bad, depending on who you are. I'd like to think the majority is good. We have officers out here that people just know them because they either grew up in this area, or they've helped them out here, or they remember you because you wrote them a speeding ticket. Whatever. The bottom line is that you have an opportunity because it is a smaller city. I always said Portsmouth is a small city with big city, problems. And solutions too. Like, we've got a smaller city, probably one of the smaller ones in the area, but we have some of the same things going on here that they do in some major cities across the country. Right. Everyone, as Detective Siniscalchi said, majority of your police departments or sheriff's offices are smaller. Everyone thinks about like LAPD or NYPD or Chicago. They think about those huge police departments, and they think that is what's going on in your neighborhood or your community every day. It's not like that everywhere. Every police department does not have the manpower or the resources that a lot of larger ones do. Now, we can get access to certain things, and this city, I think, has done a great job at working to get access to certain things that help us do our job. We are evolving every day. I think that we are headed in a great direction. But you just have to make sure that you remember that. Like, you're dealing with however many officers that we have, and we are doing the absolute best that we can every day. The majority of your officers and detectives wake up every day with the goal of going to make this city a better place. That is why we get up every morning. That's why I get up every morning. I know that's why this man gets up every morning, is we come here to take the most violent people out of society. They have done something that's so heinous, so wrong, that it is our job to try to protect the rest of the citizens from those dangerous people. That is why I get up every morning.
Well, that's what you've said. Is it aligns with what Chief has said, that Chief Jenkins participated in a program in Chicago, and it had police departments or people representing police departments from a lot of the major cities across the country. And when he was there, just talking to them, the equipment, the technology, the type of experiences that are happening in Portsmouth, a lot of those, the equipment or the resources, even those larger departments don't have.
Right.
You said Portsmouth as a city does a good job trying to get those resources. That's true, him just coming from that Chicago program. And I just like that how you ended that, of why you get up in the morning, why you are a detective, why both of you chose police work. Just making a little shift to something that's a little bit lighter. I'm interested to know, I've always wanted to ask this question, which show on TV or book or movie is the most realistic to the work you do? Because I'll tell you this, okay, so when I first saw the two of you together, what came to mind was like Martin Lowenstein and Will Smith from Bad Boys. It was the way, I don't know, you had a jacket on, and the way like you flipped the jacket in the back, I was like, okay, it's the Bad Boys. But I'm currently also watching Will Trent, so, and that's a detective show on TV, so I'm interested in knowing, like, which ones do you think are the most realistic?
There's one.
Only one.
Only one? Okay.
There's one you gotta watch.
We're going to say it. The Wire.
Okay, The Wire. Well, we're coming to the end of the Portsmouth Proud podcast, this episode anyway. I'd like to leave you two gentlemen with giving you the opportunity to give a final word. Do you have any advice, or if you want to end on what's the most rewarding aspects of being a detective? That'd be good.
I think when you have gotten to a point in the investigation where you can call that family member, and Mike and I, there's some cases where we will drive to the family member's house and we will tell them we have charged someone in their loved one's case. That is probably one of the most rewarding things. And I think we both share this. When you are in an interview and you have been in there just in the trenches and they're not going to make it easy. Your suspect's not going to make it easy. You've been in there. You've got to be willing to do this. And this man here taught me, you've got to be willing to sit in that room for hours if necessary. And when you finally can see that the interview is going to make this turn, and you finally get this person down to the point where they say, you know what, I'm going to just come clean. And they confess and they tell you, that's powerful. You have someone that literally told you that they did one of the most serious crimes known to man. They took another person's life. That is rewarding. That is truly rewarding.
Yeah, definitely everything that he said. I add on, me, it's when the family gets the answers, they know. That's rewarding.
Well, I want to just say thank you so much for joining us today. And I also want to say thank you for listening. Remember, this is your city, this is our city, so let's work together to make it great.